This KFAN podcast is sponsored by Builders and Remodelers, exclusive Twin Cities provider of Elements Windows. Get the highest quality windows at unmatchable value. Visit buildersandremodelers.com for more details.
Time is precious, and so are our pets. So time with our pets is extra precious. That's why we started Dutch. Dutch provides 24/7 access to licensed vets with unlimited virtual visits and follow-ups for up to 5 pets. You can message a vet at any time and schedule a video visit the same day. Our vets can even prescribe medication for many ailments, and shipping is always free. With Dutch, you'll get more time with your pets and year-round peace of mind when it comes to their vet care.
What I would consider a sneaky, feel-good part of the current Timberwolves experience. Now, we are aware on this show that for this playoff run, all the Wolves have done thus far is to get to round 2, right? That doesn't prove anything long-term, although obviously in relation to how bad this franchise has been over its history.
We'll take it.
You'll definitely take it, and you'll say, well, this is pretty stable success at the very least that we're talking about here, right? But a sneaky feel-good angle about the Wolves, I think, has to do with their head coach. In that, I mean, let's go back to this last series. It felt to me, as the series played out, like a bit of a mismatch. Now, I'll grant that Redick was at several disadvantages. His team is flawed. The Lakers, as I said, knew they were flawed. So to a certain extent, I'm not sure there were any, magical buttons that J.J. Redick could have pushed. But he made a couple of pretty significant blunders that made it even less likely that his team was going to be able to extend the series. This was the first time he's coached at any level, head coached, right, at any level other than 7 years old.
Yep.
I think.
Yep.
And I'm not here to say he doesn't have a chance to be a really good coach. I think to an extent you could say the part of the reason people got high on the Lakers was they won 50 games. They ended up with a record a lot better than people thought they would when they made the trade, when it was supposed to be about the future more than the present. So I'm not here to pound him that he can't be successful and get better and learn from some of his, I think, fairly obvious mistakes in the postseason, going with 5 guys for an entire half, making history there, and then the ridiculous decision to try to go even smaller, thereby allowing Rudy to think he's Wilt Chamberlain, at least for a day. But the feel-good part to me is, and I'm not here also to say that Finchie's going to be in the Hall of Fame as a coach, but the contrast is what's interesting to me. I think for a lot of people in this business, when I say this business, I mean the basketball business particularly, especially the coaching business, it's got to be easy to root for Chris Finch because guy's been coaching since he was 4. He's coached everywhere, right? He's coached in England. He's coached minor leagues here. He's been an assistant everywhere. He has basically, you could say, to a certain extent, at a time like this now, had a chance to use all of his varied experiences at several different levels in much more, I would assume, difficult circumstances, right? To draw from to help him succeed to the degree that he's already succeeded here. This is a league in which there is sometimes a place for a coach being hired who's never coached before. And sometimes it works. I'm not here to say it never does. But I think the Finchie route is rich in of itself, right? In that, as I said, he's been doing this for a long, he's been preparing himself for this for a long time, has done it at he's one of those guys who he's told some great stories about when he was coach, some of the conditions under which he coached in England and the circumstances where you kind of learn the game. You learn not just the game, you learn the coaching part of it from a grassroots level. And I think that part of it should be applauded. Do you not?
It's amazing. His first coaching job was with the Sheffield Sharks of the British Basketball League. Do you know where he played? Because there's also sometimes guys play and then they go play for a while, like Redick. He played at Duke, obviously, then played 14 years in the league. Like, he's got a pedigree, right? It's not crazy to think this guy's just going to jump in and be a head coach. Do you know where Chris Finch played his college basketball?
I don't remember.
I could give you a million guesses.
And I'd never get it.
You'd never get it. If Wikipedia is correct.
Well, yeah.
You want to try?
No, because but something is my brain has just been jogged by something I thought I heard somebody say recently, but go ahead.
He played at something called Franklin and Marshall College is where he graduated from. Was a Division III All-American. They lost in the D3 championship game to Wisconsin Platteville.
That's what I think I remember.
Bo Ryan.
Somebody saying it was Bo Ryan.
Classy and gracious in defeat.
Right.
That's where Bo Ryan was coaching there.
Correct.
And it is incredible. And as you were talking, I always go back to thinking about when he got hired unceremoniously, right? Gerson fires Ryan on the road.
With some controversy.
With a lot of controversy. Mm-hmm. And they have the first press conference, and it's like a hostage situation because Gerson's trying to do we're going to talk about the future, and everyone's like, well, no, you just fired the beloved son of the beloved coach with his wife about to give birth.
Yeah.
We're not just going to learn more about Finchy today.
Yeah.
That's not, he was put in that awkward situation. And he's gone from that where most people, even if you're a basketball observer, you probably weren't super locked in on Chris Finch, right? Being the head basketball coach in the middle of a season at that point.
Yeah.
And now he's become Finchy.
Yes.
I mean, he's got, the shirts people make about him. People love his hair. The fact that he got hurt last year, he's got a great coaching staff that everybody likes. It's a crazy kind of 180 from how he started where we didn't know about him. And now, and people don't always universally love him.
No.
Because that's a basketball coach. You're going to question, is he sticking with Randall too long? Why doesn't he call timeouts when the wheels are coming off? Blah, blah, blah. But it's an amazing story. And it's always, in short, it's a guy who paid his dues.
Exactly. It's a league in which we tend to gravitate towards the household names. A good example is there's people bitter about what the Spurs did, where they promoted the interim coach, whose name now escapes me, in the wake of the news that Greg Popovich says, I'm done coaching. I'm just going to be front office guy running the organization from there. And there's a lot of, well, you got to go, you got to go out and get Malone. You got to go. There's some big. That's a great job.
Mitch Johnson.
Thank you. And hey, Mitch Johnson may be a bust. I have no idea. There's been no pressure on him yet. Now it's going to start ratcheting up because I think the expectations are going to start rising with them. But there's something organic about finding a guy that nobody's heard of, or I shouldn't say nobody, but the average fan hasn't heard of, even if he's been coaching in the league as an assistant for a while, as Finchy had been, and seeing it develop, see it grow, and a coach in this case being rewarded, who you could say at the very least has had, in a sense, an awful lot of experience at various levels to help bring him to this place. And I think that's the unfair part of asking a Redick on the basis of, had a good podcast.
LeBron liked him.
To walk in
they talked ball a lot.
And be able to figure everything out the first time around is that's really not realistic, because what does he really have to draw from? So that's part of the story. I'm not here to tell you that Finchy's a perfect coach. I'm not here to say he's headed to the Hall of Fame. I think he has done, to this point, a pretty good job putting the pieces together in a way that I was very dubious over the course of the season, as I know at times you were.
For sure.
As well. And he has to, I think, get some of the credit for that. Getting to that place where, because there's been a lot of come to Jesus meeting stories written in the last few weeks about how did this come together? When did this come together? A lot of people say there was a team meeting they had before the Suns game, which was, I think, right before then also Randall came back, in which people were a lot less defensive about criticism and about sort of everybody sort of owning up, whatever. But some of that is the coach has some responsibility to set in place the conditions that make it more likely that players are going to accept that as well. And I think it's always an easy story or to root for when it's a guy who can tell you these stories about the non-sexy, non-exciting, non-famous places that he's coached and just coached. Just learned the game, learned how to deal with egos, at whatever level it might be.
England, coached in Germany, got fired. Coached then in Belgium for another stretch.
Yes.
And then latched on with the Rio Grande Valley Vipers in the D-League before Kevin McHale and J.B. Bickerstaff brought him into the NBA.
Right.
Houston assistant, and then the rest is history.
The rest is history. Dan, wasn't Larry Bird coach of the Pacers without any experience, but he had a couple good seasons. He did. I'm not here to say it can't be done. I'm here to say I like rooting for a guy who has had all these varied experiences. And I would also say the Bird comparison's a little off in that, Larry Bird was around basketball at the very, very highest level in a way that I think made it more likely that he could do well. But we've also seen a number of former players who weren't particularly good, especially superstar players, including Magic Johnson,
I was going to say,
who was not very successful as a head coach. All right, we got Johnny at 5:30. I want to get to ranking the rich story angles that sort of connect these two franchises. Some of them are obvious, some of them a little less so, the Golden State Warriors and the Wolves. I got a couple of other non-basketball items to get to as well. Keep the emails coming or the texts coming. Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line is 64686.
Dan and BigDeck.com want to give you a shot to win bonus bucks with our national cash contest. And the second keyword of the afternoon is win. Go to KFAN.com and enter the keyword.
Time is precious, and so are our pets. So time with our pets is extra precious. That's why we started Dutch. Dutch provides 24/7 access to licensed vets with unlimited virtual visits and follow-ups for up to 5 pets. You can message a vet at any time and schedule a video visit the same day. Our vets can even prescribe medication for many ailments, and shipping is always free. With Dutch, you'll get more time with your pets and year-round peace of mind when it comes to their vet care.
Word win. Head down to the island this Thursday for the KFAN and Treasure Island Timberwolves Game 2 watch party. The Power Trip Morning Show's Marnie Gellner will have your chance to win great prizes. That includes Timberwolf playoff tickets. You can learn more at TICasino.com.
How about your Winnipeg Jets comeback, by the way?
Unbelievable.
Blues are up 3-1. There's less than 2 minutes to go in regulation, correct?
Yes.
And they get the first goal to slice the lead in half.
Yes.
And then the second goal is with between 2 and 3 seconds to go in the game.
Yeah. It was like, and they'd already missed like another shot earlier in that little flourish. Yes. Got the puck back.
In all seriousness, and then the Jets win it in OT, correct?
Yes.
In the history of state of hockey, have we ever had a loss that could rank with that in terms of pure and sheer devastation? I don't think it's possible, is it?
I'm not old enough to remember all the North Star stuff.
Yeah.
I know some people are going to say the stanchion goal in Game 6 against the Blackhawks in overtime.
Yeah, right.
Which, to me, no.
No, that's not in the same
Not
league.
even close. I think I saw somewhere that it's like the latest goal ever scored to tie up a Game 7 ever in the history of the hockey, which you could imagine, right? And you know why I'm bitter? This is how sick I am. Well, first of all, I was bouncing back and forth between the basketball Game 7 and then this. And I see St. Louis is up 3-1. So I flip back. I go, I wonder how that one ended. And it says intermission overtime report.
And you're like, what?
And I said, well, that's interesting. I wonder how they came back, having no idea that it was this dramatic. Right. Do you know how queued up I was to queue it up for you? Because what did we hear all year? You don't want to play Winnipeg in the postseason. They're a wagon. Are you kidding me? They won their first.
That's what Louis said.
They won their first 42 games in a row. They were just stacking points, and we were going to see the second wild card team knock them off in the first round. It was going to play perfectly.
The ammo was set
for
up
the bit.
Yes.
I couldn't wait to text you.
And then Winnipeg won.
And then Winnipeg wins, and the bit's dead.
Let's broaden the subject. In the history of Minnesota sports, have we ever lost that late in that dramatic fashion? I mean, what would be, I don't even know, in other sports, I guess in football.
It'd be the Minneapolis Miracle for the Saints, probably.
Right,
like
but we were on the other end of it.
Right, I know. Yeah. I'm just trying to think.
And it can't, the famous PA Arizona call, no, Vikings are knocked out of the playoffs.
Right.
Because that was on the last play.
It was.
That's not with enough at stake, even though it was getting into the playoffs.
Right.
I guess the point I'm trying to make is I'm trying to remind folks that as much as we think the worst stuff always happens to us,
imagine St. Louis
it
today.
Can't happen any worse than how it happened to the St. Louis fan base. In this case, obviously the Blues fan base last night. You can't.
Nope.
You can't make that up.
There were some people in St. Louis, some fans and reporters that were getting ready were filming the crowd, having watch parties to get the reaction when they hold on and win Game 7 to advance. That's the whole reason they hit record on their phone or on their camera, whatever it was. And, of course, they get a much different reaction than the one that they were intending to get from watch parties all over the city.
That's a stunner.
If you're a Blues fan, I don't know how you ever forget it or get over it or move on. It's devastating.
Yeah, that's as rich as it gets for a poet. And, the poetry was, at that point, the Jets kind of have to win the game, don't they, in OT?
They have to.
Otherwise, the story, I would say it's ruined, but a lot of it is the effect of it is taken away if St. Louis comes back and wins in OT.
It's the equivalent of going to Philadelphia the next week, scoring the first touchdown, and then losing 38-7 in the NFC Championship game. That would be the equivalent.
Glad to see you're not past that.
Of it. Well, but even though it also doesn't always just happen to us badly, I know Dallas and Colorado are two other wagons in the Central Division, right? And the Avs fans are all trying to figure out how do they keep losing to Dallas.
Right.
McKinnon had the big thing. He's like, they've got one of their best forwards is out, they've got one of their best Ds out, and we can't beat these guys. So in Colorado, they make big moves at the trade deadline, really going for it. We talked about it at the time, and they're in the same position as the Wild doing exit interviews.
The Stars score 4 third-period goals, right, to complete the 4-2 come-from-behind victory over the Lanch. To your point, I think, and wasn't that the night before?
Yeah, I think it was Saturday.
I think it was back-to-back. That's pretty good theater. That's pretty good hockey theater. But again, it's already happening where, because our team's out, I'm already separated from it. I can't help it. I'm separated from it. The same way, believe it or not, I would be if the Wolves were eliminated. I would still follow some NBA stuff, I'll grant, but nowhere near to the same degree. We talked about this for years, how disconnected one feels once the local team is out of the thing. It just, none of it feels as interesting or compelling or as exciting to pay attention to as when your team is still part of the action.
I had so little care about the NBA Finals last year after the Wolves lost because I was in that mourning period and Luka just carved us up and what were we doing? And then they got basically handled the entire series, which was also annoying.
Correct.
So I exactly right. Yeah. Once you lose, there's not a lot of connectivity there.
No, not much at all. I guess we can go, you can go Hail Mary. You want to go back that far, Vikings, in terms of pain?
I guess.
Although that wasn't the last, I don't think that was the last play of the game.
I don't think it was.
I think the Vikings got the ball back. I don't think they had much of a chance to do anything with it, but I'm pretty sure they got it. It was late, and obviously the game appeared over, but
the equivalent would probably be on a college level a couple of years ago when the Gopher hockey team had the championship game basically wrapped up in Tampa.
Yes, somebody did bring that up.
Gave up a couple of goals late in the third, and then first shift of overtime, it's over.
That's true.
Just like that.
That might be...
That's probably about as devastating, maybe even more so, because in that case, it's a banner you're about to hang. It's a championship, and it wasn't with 1.6 seconds left, if I remember, but it was late in the third. I mean, that was dead meat. I love the Phil Jackson line. I'm going to keep bringing it up. That was dead bleeping meat the whole third period,
yes.
And they're hanging on to try to win that thing, and rightfully hoist the banner with an absolutely loaded team that included Brock Faber, who 10 minutes after that game was playing for the Wild in the postseason.
That's true.
And they give that one up in front of 15,000 Gopher fans in Tampa St. Pete. That's about as devastating as what happened last night.
By the way, for the record, your Timberwolves finished the regular season 17-4, correct?
They did.
And they're 4-1 since the playoffs began. So if I'm doing that math right, 21-5 over the last 26. The Golden State Warriors finished the season 21-7.
Yeah.
They just went 4-3 in their playoff series, right? Best of 7.
They did.
Their record is 25-10. So, and by the way, didn't the Pacers, I think the Pacers since January have been one of the hottest teams in ball. I do think there is some correlation sometimes to whoever happens to figure it out and get hot at the right time. But in the case of the Wolves and the Warriors, you are seeing two teams that the last half of the season fashioned extremely good records. And now they get to play each other. Now, the Lakers also, I think, finished pretty strong. And the Wolves, did not have that much trouble with them. I was interested to hear Mitch Lawrence say he thinks the Wolves, he said, on the one hand, he told me he thought the Warriors were a tougher matchup for the Wolves than the Lakers would be. But in the end, he picked the Wolves in 6 or maybe 5. So take that for what it's worth. Also, by the way, you're going to see, I'm sure, because historically the Wolves have used Nikhil on Steph as well. You're going to see a number of different people, I think. But the matchups will be interesting to see what the Wolves decide on. Who guards Edwards for Golden State?
I'm not sure.
Buckets? I don't. He's a good two-way player, but at this point, that's a lot of activity, though. So I'm sure we'll talk about all of that with Johnny in about 1 hour. Let's make this the bottom of the hour pause. Bradshaw and Brian KFAN text line is still open, 64686. And what time is your apology to Caitlin Clark?
Time is precious, and so are our pets. So time with our pets is extra precious. That's why we started Dutch. Dutch provides 24/7 access to licensed vets with unlimited virtual visits and follow-ups for up to 5 pets. You can message a vet at any time and schedule a video visit the same day. Our vets can even prescribe medication for many ailments, and shipping is always free. With Dutch, you'll get more time with your pets and year-round peace of mind when it comes to their vet care.
We will be ranking the rage lines related to Wolves Warriors here in just a couple of minutes. I got this text from a show contributor. My cousin lives in St. Louis and is a Blues fan. He is classic for sending me messages whenever the Wild are losing to the Blues or the Twins to the Cardinals or the Vikings against anyone. He usually says, "Hey, man, my cable is out. What's the score of the game?" I had just jumped in the car last night when Winnipeg tied it. I texted, "Hey, I just jumped in the car and the game's not on the radio. What's the score of the Blues-Jets game?" He did not respond until...
That's a tough one.
Sometime this morning. Yeah, well...
That's one where you kind of got to lay out.
Comes back to you.
It does.
There's no question about that. All right, here's my ranking, my unofficial ranking of the rage lines, Wolves, Warriors, because we certainly know that the connections here are deep and abiding. I will start... Well, I'll just start with number 1 rather than doing the old countdown. To me, I'm curious to get your view of this. I think at the top of the list, despite the Buckets enmity, I think Draymond is number 1. In part because it's more recent. The rage is more recent. It involves not just the way fans feel about this player, but I think to an extent the way Wolves players still on the team feel about Draymond and the degree to which they think he disrespected one of their starters and a player that obviously had his best playoff game in his last game, the 27-point, 24-rebound performance. Thanks in no small measure to J.J. Redick deciding, hey, let's just try guarding. So let's try using somebody 6'5" against him. See how that goes. And it did not go very, very well at all. So with, you got what Draymond did, grabbing Rudy by the neck. Who else was involved in that discord?
Well, it all kind of started with Jaden and Klay Thompson.
That's right.
That's how the whole thing kind of got
degenerated from there.
Yes.
And then at some point... Draymond grabs Rudy around the neck. There's no, I'm not exaggerating it. That's what happened, right? Did we ever look up the suspension? We'll double check.
I'm doing it right now. Yeah.
Because that was significant. And then, as if that wasn't enough, as we said, as the Wolves are making a run to the conference finals, Draymond is reveling in whatever Rudy's struggles are. In fact, sometimes pretending Rudy was struggling even when he wasn't because of envy and jealousy. The belief that I should have at least 1 or 2 more Defensive Player of the Year awards, and Rudy should have 1 or 2 fewer. The other guys on the panel, instead of doing what they do when they're at their best, arguing with each other and disapproving of each other, they all went in on it, and they all cackled, and they all had fun, and let's gang up on Rudy to the point where, although there wasn't a big issue about it discussed at the time, the Wolves very quietly decided, I think as a group, that we're not coming out to that set if they ask for one of us, we're not going to do it because we don't like the way our teammate is being treated. So to me, that's number one.
Yes.
Above and beyond any of the others.
It was a 5-game suspension for the Rudy chokehold.
Okay.
He was then suspended indefinitely for striking Yusuf Nurkic in the face.
That's right.
That eventually cost him 12 games. That was basically the I'm going to get help suspension, apparently.
Yes, that's true.
Who knows if he actually did that or not. No, Draymond, and part of me doesn't like giving Draymond that much power in this series. But it's denying reality that if you're asking me what would feel best as a Wolves fan or observer of knocking off the Golden State Warriors in the postseason, it would be that. It would be listening to the Draymond Green podcast after the Wolves knocked out the Golden State Warriors. What would give you the most satisfaction of winning the series? I think it would be all of them shutting Draymond up about Rudy.
The last
and
thing
everything else
I want to do is attempt to neutralize or diminish the day-to-day rage. But I will tell you that I had one of those moments. This was after they got clobbered, humiliated in Game 6 at home. Terrible fourth quarter. They looked done. They really did in that game. And I happened to be watching NBA TV for whatever the reason, because a lot of times they'll put the press conferences on or parts of them after.
It's great. Yep.
And they ran Draymond's post game in the big, not in the locker room, but they bring you out to the room where it's a little bit more formal. And I got to tell you, if you watched what he said and the way he conducted himself, you'd go, why do I hate this guy?
Right.
He was articulate about what Houston had done to he acknowledged. He was very, I guess you would say, understanding is not the right word. He was very positive in saying, man, they did some stuff to us that we didn't, quite frankly, handle very well, that I didn't handle very well. He answered every question. He was not jackassy about any of it. He was not defensive about any of it. He was reflective. He gave long, thoughtful answers. And we all know, I mean, Green is one of the smartest players who's ever played. He's an extreme, it sounds crazy to say it because of all the nonsense, but he's an unbelievably cerebral player. Anybody who follows the game understands that. But I got done with it going, God, anybody sees this, they're going to be neutered about whatever rage they have on. He's just
right.
And it does show there is that other side of him. When he wants to go down that road, he can be very good. And part of the reason I thought the Warriors were done, he sounded to me like he was giving a concession speech. But deep down, probably what he was doing is, all right, here's what I know that we have to do. I'm not necessarily going to give all that out now. And it was, as I look back on it, maybe that was why he had such an inner sense of calm. Like, okay, we've been here before. This does look bad, but if we just do A, B, and C, and if Steph and I talk with a couple people and we get buckets in on the meeting, we'll take care of it. But he was outstanding after that thing.
Well, there's a reason why Tom Izzo was willing to put up with him, why Steve Kerr and Steph Curry have been willing to put up with him on their team.
Yes.
Despite all the nonsense and distractions. There's a reason. Because he's obviously very impactful and he's obviously very smart and gets how that whole thing is supposed to work. We've been talking about Day-Day, going back to how he was. You want to talk about why organizations are good? That dude was a second-round pick that turned into an all-NBA type player in their prime. And I remember talking to Tibbs about him in the hallway because he was a young player back then, or at least an ascending player back then. Just all the ways that he impacts winning. There's a reason.
Which is why coaches love him.
Exactly right.
Even if they know they're going to roll their eyes about some of the other nonsense, including Steve Kerr.
Exactly
right. He's gone, oh my God, what am I dealing with here? But that's how and another big component about in that post game was his comments about Popovich. And again, it's not hard to compliment Greg Popovich.
Right.
But, the way he said what he said, the examples he used for why he thought so much of Popovich and what he thought he got out of him, you're going, man, this is no Wolves fan headed to game one should watch this.
Yeah, I kind of want to change the narrative here. I don't like what you're doing.
I want you guys to, because it might soften whatever hard feelings you have. Now, the beauty of it with Day-Day, though, is he'll take care of that after the first cheap shot.
Yeah, and that's why to me, it's almost annoying because I don't know why he feels the need to do that stuff or the Gobert. Like, to me, he's better than that as a player.
He would say that's him.
I know. And they all have to keep their edge somehow because you watch him and there are those dramatic sides where it's obvious the Gobert thing is just completely personal. And the TNT stuff last year was a joke. We talked about it at the time.
Yeah, it was awful. It was unprofessional.
And I think Ernie's the one I'm most annoyed with throughout that whole episode with him, but also the shutting down a reporter in the elevator. Yeah. It's like, come on, Ernie. Yeah. Like, you're not 10. So that whole thing, that whole episode, that whole stretch was annoying just as a TNT observer.
All right, so
how the Wolves handle the Draymond stuff, to me, is the key to the whole series. Because,
no question.
Randall, like Mitch Lawrence just told you 45 minutes ago, they're going to be separated at some point. Edwards is going to be chirping. McDaniels, we know, runs hot and wants to get involved.
And that's okay if it's under control. It's not like you got to go curl up in the fetal position with him, but you got to be smart and judicious. Consume you. And it can't take over what you're doing.
He wants it to consume you.
So, regarding ranking the rage lines from the Wolves standpoint in this series, Draymond, to me, is easily number one. Jimmy Butler is clearly number two, for all the obvious reasons. And maybe I misread things because when I brought this up the other day, I thought that enough time had passed and the Wolves had attained enough success that people wouldn't be quite as consumed with it. But you told me you believed otherwise, and a lot of people agree with you that it's going to be hot and heavy when he gets in there because, in part, there hasn't, even though it's been many years and the Wolves have sort of remade themselves, there haven't been really a lot of opportunities to vent because buckets tended to not play when his teams played here. So clearly that's going to be a thing. I still think it's second to Draymond. Three's got to be, even though it's been talked about a million times, and this isn't really rage towards the player. This is rage towards the Meerkat David Kahn.
Yeah.
It can never be forgotten, especially if in game one, the Warriors shock the world and shock the Wolves, and Curry goes for 40.
I don't know, show of hands.
The decision many years ago to not draft Steph Curry and to miss, he had two opportunities to do it. And, at the time, Meerkat might have even said this to us in one of the exit interviews with us that, the Curry camp had made it clear that he wasn't going to play here. And as a lot of people said then and have said since, and as Curry himself has admitted, he wasn't going to walk for a year. He was not going to sit out a year. They were trying to manipulate the system, discourage the Wolves from taking him, and it worked. But the fact of the matter is, he was going to show up. That's not how, I just don't think that's how Curry's wired.
Well, and he wasn't that no doubt of a prospect to have that juice at the time.
That's true,
He was still the kid from Davidson that had a couple of really good NCAA tournament runs.
Yes.
He wasn't, just go down the list, he wasn't a Cooper Flagg type prospect. He wasn't LeBron.
There was debate. There were some people who did love him.
Sure.
But there were a number of people who said, too frail.
He didn't have that juice.
He's going to get eaten up physically. He's not going to be able to handle the physical pounding of the league. So you're exactly right. But that's one of those where it's going to keep being brought back if he has great games in this series and ends up being the difference somehow if Golden State steals the series. Or is one of the differences you are going to inevitably go back to something that most people have gotten over again because the team's good again. I understand wallowing in all this stuff more when the team's terrible and continues to be terrible, and it's hard to get out of that mindset. Team is resurrected. This franchise is resurrected to a place it's never quite frankly been at before, even in the best Garnett years. But you're going to look back on it. If he's tremendous, you're going to go, God, they really did. They passed on him twice for Ricky Rubio,
which was a no-brainer.
I endorsed.
Yep.
Among others, and John Flynn.
John Flynn was the tough one there.
Yeah, and again, he probably would have been a better NBA player than he ended up being, in part because he did have injuries.
Right.
I don't think the smile was going to be enough to make him a point god, however.
Mav fans right now are in the early stages of this because what always comes up when Curry would have one of those crazy league pass nights is the Wolves passed on him twice, and they'd have the draft board, right, that had Rubio and Flynn. People made T-shirts of that draft board that then had Curry below Rubio and Flynn. Mav fans right now are getting the early stages of that. Maybe not right this second, but when Luka started having big nights for the Lakers, the tweets would come out, they traded him. They actually traded him.
Right.
That's what Mav fans are going through right now, what Wolves fans have gone through since, I think, 2009.
Very true. And the sneaky fourth one I have goes back to a different era. And we've talked about this a little bit before on the program. If you go back to the 1989 draft, the Minnesota Timberwolves had the 10th overall pick in round one.
Yeah.
And their first pick.
It was. Yeah.
And they took.
You want to quiz me?
You'll probably know.
Well, I know it. Yeah.
Jerome Pooh Richardson.
UCLA.
Okay? Who, by the way, ended up having a decent career. But they ignored another point guard they could have taken, who ended up going 14th in that draft. His name was Tim Hardaway, not junior. Tim Hardaway Sr. Golden State Warriors took him. And the story was told at the time, and it's been repeated and confirmed many times after the fact by Tim Hardaway himself, that part of the reason Hardaway is convinced that he fell to 14 was that Don Nelson made sure to tell, through various sly ways, other teams picking ahead of them that Hardaway had a knee problem that was ultimately going to be so chronic and so debilitating that he was never really even going to have a very successful professional career, even if everybody agreed he had some talent. And among the individuals that Nelly contacted about it was a guy by the name of, not Eric Musselman, but Eric's father, Bill Musselman, the coach of the Timberwolves in their obviously in their infancy, in their early years. And in fact, here's the quote from Hardaway. This was, I don't think that long ago. I don't remember where this interview is from, but he has said it many times. First of all, I suppose I was supposed to go to, I went to Indiana, Minnesota. So they get Pooh Richardson to Minnesota. I was supposed to go 3 or 4. Come to find out, Don Nelson is calling all the teams that were supposed to pick me and telling them I got a bum knee, and he picks me. He also says that in conversations later with Bill Musselman said, we shouldn't have listened to that damn Don Nelson. We could have had you, in conversations that Muss later had with Hardaway as well. Now, was Tim Hardaway one of the greatest players of all time? No. But he was as I recall it, I think he was a 5-time All-Star.
He was a big-time player.
5-time All-NBA player. And God bless Jerome Pooh Richardson, a hell of a guy who had some ability. And again, this wasn't an easy situation here in Minnesota at the start. But I don't think he was ever an All-Star, and I don't think he was ever All-NBA. I think Hardaway's in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, he should be.
I think Tim Hardaway's in the Hall of Fame.
I don't know why he wouldn't be.
In any case, that's a sneaky one that goes, again, that's a previous generation, but it's kind of akin to the Steph Curry one. Not quite on the same level, but Tim Hardaway was a badass point guard. Tough as nails, played on some really good, interesting Golden State Warriors teams, right? Miami eventually as well.
Yep.
A hell of a basketball player. So it's twice Golden State fans have us to thank for very good players in their history ending up with them. We passed on Tim Hardaway in 89, and we passed on Steph Curry many, many years later.
How
Twice.
stupid are all those teams that actually do listen to another NBA head coach / executive talking? Like, Nelly must have been a real trustworthy guy.
Nelly was, I know.
How dumb are you?
Yeah.
Like, bad knees. Well, we have doctors. Check his knee out. Why is Don Nelson Sheldon Burns? That doesn't make any sense.
At some point, the light bulb should go off in your head and say, now, where are they picking? Wait a minute. They're picking 14, you say. And so, in other words, if Nelly keeps telling people, don't take this guy, do you think maybe he has an ulterior motive? Or do you think he's really trying to help us out? And apparently Muss was among those who fell for it.
Nobody cares, but I was at a Luther basketball camp when I was a kid, B.J. Armstrong's basketball camp, who was also drafted in that class. He was drafted by the Bulls.
Right.
18. Tom Davis was a guest speaker there.
Dr. Tom Davis.
Dr. Tom. And he told a story about that draft where, if I remember it right, he basically was taking credit for Tim Hardaway Jr. being drafted so high because he coached him in some pre-draft series where he wanted to run pick and roll stuff for BJ, but BJ got hurt or something, and Hardaway came in, this kid from UTEP, and just carved him up.
Yeah.
And he goes, this guy ends up being the 14th overall select. He was basically giving himself, the Pulp Fiction.
Right.
And,
yes.
But it's just funny how many stories are out of that draft with this guy who, like you say, ended up being a really good All-NBA type player, Tim Hardaway.
I got a couple texts saying, well, wait a minute, Pooh Richardson was very good. There's no comparison between Pooh Richardson as an NBA player and Hardaway, and that's not even a rip on Pooh. It's just I don't even think he would disagree with that. Hardaway was miles better, tougher player. You could even say his game translated better to the pros because he had a physicality to him, even though he was as a guard. One of those guys who never stopped talking either. Hardaway was one of those known to constantly be chirping on the court as well. So those are my main four. If there's any hidden sneaky connections that I'm forgetting or that we need to add to the list, we can do that because this series is just beginning tomorrow night.
Well, can I just throw one up in the air?
Yeah.
I'm curious what you think about this one because this quote has also made the rounds a lot. It's very famous that in the pre-draft process, in the pre-draft workout, Steve Kerr told Anthony Edwards.
Somebody just texted that. You're right.
If we had the number one pick, we wouldn't draft you.
Yeah.
And I think because Kerr's like this generation's pop now. Everything he says we think sounds better when he says it. Like we all understand his point. It was you got to work harder.
Right,
and I think that's how Anthony Edwards took it originally. Mm-hmm. But does Anthony Edwards, does he think about that all these years later? He mentioned he wants to play the Warriors a couple of years ago, mostly because of the Draymond thing. But Ant, these guys all file away all this stuff. And they didn't have the number one pick.
I'll answer your question.
It didn't even matter.
I'll answer your question. If he's Michael Jordan-like, he absolutely is going to make a mountain out of this molehill.
Where's James Wiseman
at?
Yeah.
He will turn it into, I didn't play, I didn't work hard enough, and that. Well, is this hard enough, Steve Kerr? When I put 42 points and 12 assists and 1 turnover in the box score, is that?
Yeah.
Was I playing hard enough in game one? Yeah. There's no question. I don't know if he's going to make a big issue of it, but if the Wolves are smart, they will be whispering that in his head and putting that in his head as well.
I'm also curious how Ant handles Butler, not because he has any history with him, but because he's such a Cat guy and Cat's his guy. And we know about the Cat Butler relationship. Johnny always talked about the COVID year.
Yeah, you're right. That's a good point,
When he was asked about Butler, Anthony took the question because he knew how annoyed Carl would be to have to talk about it again. We just saw the video of Anthony telling LeBron to congratulate Rudy on his big night. And I don't know if you've seen that one. It's just hilarious. Congratulate my teammate. 27 points, 24 rebounds. He's chirping LeBron at game 5. That's what Anthony's doing. Does he, if they're in a similar situation, does he bring that back and go, yeah, same round as Cat, looks like to me. He's about to go out to the Celtics and you're about to go out to us.
Yeah.
What does that come back to him somehow? I don't know.
Very, very possible that it does. Top 5 at 5 will include...
We know the opponent. We'll talk a little bit about that, and we will talk a lot about what happened in Winnipeg last night, Game 7, with 2 seconds to go.
Time is precious, and so are our pets. So time with our pets is extra precious. That's why we started Dutch. Dutch provides 24/7 access to licensed vets, with unlimited virtual visits and follow-ups for up to 5 pets. You can message a vet at any time and schedule a video visit the same day. Our vets can even prescribe medication for many ailments, and shipping is always free. With Dutch, you'll get more time with your pets and year-round peace of mind when it comes to their vet care.